All right, and now for our feature presentation. Welcome to our candidates tonight for Minnesota House District 21B, John Wilson and Marge Fogelman. And I don't think we need to go over the rules. We just watched the first four. Got a pile of questions, so hopefully we'll get a lot covered in terms of ground tonight. We will start with 2-minute introductions, and why don't we just start directly to my right, and we will have John start.
Well, thank you everybody for coming tonight. Just give you kind of a sense of who I am. I will tell you my day. So I got up and was able to take my 2 daughters to school today. I spent 2 hours teaching today. In the morning, I talked about the beginning of the Civil War. Then I had a government class that we started talking about socialism and communism in our introductory chapter. I then went off to, as my mayor hat was put on, and went to the county commissioner meeting, a public hearing about the increase in taxes to sales tax for Watonwan County. Came back to school, was able to teach another lesson of early Civil War stuff. And then I went off to have a discussion with a local church group that wanted me to come in and discuss the Constitution to them as a government teacher. After that, I went back to school and finished off my day. Then at time that the bell went off, then I went off to be a football coach. And I'm also the offensive coordinator, so I had to call offense for about an hour and a half. Then after that, I went to our council meeting. So I went to a council meeting as mayor, began that council meeting, and then left and then came here. After this, I get to go back home and then put my football hat back on and watch more film and get ready for Friday night. All of that together has been a weird and crazy time. You know, when everybody kind of talks about, as mayor is kind of the different part to my mayor. I ran in 2022 as a write-in, was able to win that election as a 60% write-in vote because I felt that we needed a different leadership of the two that were there. And so now I'm here wanting to do the exact same thing for our communities throughout 21B. And I certainly would appreciate and love the questions that I see are coming our way. So.
Well, welcome everyone tonight, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event and for Ryan for being the moderator. My name is Marge Fogelman. I am the current state representative for District 21B. That includes 2/3 of Nobles County, 4 townships in Cottonwood County, half of Watonwan County, all of Jackson County, and 4 townships in Martin County. I rely on my faith to lead me through all my decisions. It is important for my family life, my work life, and my representative life. I have lived in Southwest Minnesota for my entire life and in this district. And I started paying attention to what was going on during COVID. I wasn't really a big political person, but it got me involved to see what was going on in our state. I felt that our freedoms were disappearing, and I wanted to do something to make a change. I have enjoyed receiving the correspondence I have from many people over the district. I have enjoyed talking with people, one-on-one conversations. It's been very rewarding to help different people get through different problems and navigate things, as well as business issues and small nonprofits that need assistance. It's part of the job is to get people in touch with other people, and that is probably my favorite part of doing this job. I am thankful to the voters and everyone that has supported me through the last 2 years and continue to support me throughout what I do. So thank you all for coming tonight, and I look forward to answering your questions.
All right. We'll give the first question to Marge to start. What are the 3 most important issues in your campaign?
Thank you for the question. It's kind of hard to narrow things down to 3 specific subjects because there's a lot of things going on in Minnesota that need changing. But the constitutional things that I think are important are maintaining our roads and bridges and our public safety. Another thing that has come up, and I don't know how many people are aware of it, but waste, fraud, and abuse is reaching a point of almost $1 billion in our state under this administration with really no accountability. And that's something I think that we need to look at and see what's going on. So that is another thing. And obviously our schools, I think, are important, so I'm adding that. Our literacy has gone down 16%, and our kids are reading at less than 50% of grade level, and we need to change.
Yeah, thank you for the question. My 3 are, kind of revolve around my mayor hat a little bit. Local government aid, bolster local economies, and affordable housing. Local government aid is, the commissioners talked about taxes, we talked about levies, and those words are coming out. Local government aid from the state is where that all begins. And if you're able to get what we should be getting from the state, then we won't have to have our higher property tax, we won't have to have our higher levies that are there. Local economies, especially in greater Minnesota, is highly important to build up our economy or the people that have the working jobs. We've done that in St. James. And affordable housing as well is certainly not only the people that think about the low income, but we're talking more about like the middle income people that maybe the younger generation that may not be able to afford that home because the medium household thing is like $300,000. Who can afford a $300,000 home? So those are kind of the 3 that I'm looking at.
All right, now we're going to get into a specific issue. Rural Minnesota is suffering from a lack of and dwindling EMT services. Why aren't rural Minnesota EMT services funded by the state? I'm just reading the question, and we'll start with John.
So the EMT services, as Mayor of St. James, what I've seen is that as of this year we're about $100,000 in the hole, and obviously other places in our budget has to do that. Last year, that's one of the reasons why I am running, because last year we did have a forum in St. James that had other local communities that are also hurting, and our representative basically was disengaged in what was going on. In the end, the bottom line is we need to have essential service. Understand that EMT service is not an essential part of our system like firefighters and police. That has to start first, then you're going to get the funding that you need. Then you're going to have the ability to have recruiting, you're going to have people that actually have retirement as an ambulance service for our paramedics as well.
Thank you for that question. Just want to remind everyone that last year, or the last couple years now, we had a budget surplus, basically overtaxing our citizens $18 billion. And then they raised taxes another $10 billion under the Democrat trifecta. If the EMT situation is not new, but it was not a priority under the Democrat-controlled government. Now, they also funded a $730 million palace for politicians. So these things are taking priority when we know these things are going on. As I am a legislator right now, I think the best thing to do with this now is to listen and learn from all the parties involved, because there are public EMT, there are hospital-owned EMT, and there are private on EMT and cities. So we need to sit down with everybody involved and looking forward going forward, make a plan that's going to help everyone because we need to keep this service for all of Minnesota.
All right, we're going to turn to education. What do you think are the biggest issues facing education in our state? And is there anything can be done to improve test scores?
Thank you for that question. Under the Waltz administration, our literacy has fallen 16%. We need to look at getting kids back on track and caught up. The last 2 years, we passed 65 mandates on schools. Even though they had record funding of $2.2 billion for our schools, it was eaten up with those mandates. So even though it looked like our schools were getting fully funded, that money was actually gobbled up and not used for our students. We need to give our schools back some local control, and we need to offer school choice so that our parents can decide where their kids can go and they are getting the best education that they can.
Thank you. As a teacher, I get to see it every day. Students are working hard to try to get their literacy rates up. Teachers are working extra hard to get those literacy rates up. I don't know if there's truly a solution to those problems, but the bottom line is that students are working to get better. They may not ever hit that. A lot of you in here may not be at a grade level reading level. I certainly am not. I'm one of those that probably would not be at a grade level reading thing, and I do quite well reading in real life. So the test scores, the NCEA scores, may not be a direct result of what our students and our teachers are actually doing in the classroom. So everybody needs to get kind of go back a little bit and find out what is actually happening for those kids. The kids that come in that never had education before are hitting our teachers. Okay, we have I have 9th graders, 10th graders that have never had school since 4th grade.
All right, well, I suppose we got to go there eventually. Do you support any limitations on abortion?
I support pro-choice. I support, and if you look at the latest surveys and stuff, 85% of people in the United States support either some type of circumstance with reproductive or kind of something, basically. A lot of people believe in the first trimester is there. It is the woman's choice. It is the family's choice to do that. I would hate to ever have to, as a legislator, make that decision. We have a person in Texas that I've seen in the news that had to go to another state. Now she is pregnant and having the ability to have another child without in the grave. And I think that's important for women and families to make their own decisions in regards to reproductive rights.
Thank you for that question. It's kind of not an issue that abortion is legal in Minnesota, and I cannot change that, and that won't ever change. What I will change and want to work on changing is that right now in Minnesota you can have an abortion up to the day that a child is born, and I do not think that's okay. And now that babies that are born from a botched abortion, they do not anymore give life-saving care to those babies. So those are things that I think are important. And the ability to choose is not mine. I believe that God is in control of my life from the moment of conception until the day that I die. And that is my personal beliefs. But like I said, abortion is legal in Minnesota, and that is something that won't change.
All right. Switching gears quite a bit, I'm going to read it just like it says on the piece of paper because I made a comment. I usually don't make comments about questions, but this question reads, where do you stand on this BS cannabis law? Marge, take that one.
I did not vote for the cannabis law, and I do not support it. Before the bill passed, I did take time to speak to our sheriffs, and it was nothing that any of them supported. Kind of was putting the cart before the horse, they felt. There was not enough things in place before the law was active, and it's just caused chaos all the way down to our counties and our local levels. So I hope that is something that if we can restore some balance back into Minnesota and some common sense, that this is something that we can change.
This would be something I agree with Marge on quite a bit. So one of these, whether you believe in the cannabis part, or you believe in, obviously I do believe in the medical marijuana and cannabis piece, that people certainly do need it. Certainly do need that fact. But the bottom line is that this is kind of one of those examples where you have government kind of making these decisions, and then just as the county commissioners talked about earlier, then it's thrown out to the counties and the cities, and that's kind of where we've been as the city of St. James as mayor, is that we don't know what to do, and we don't understand, who's going to get the licensing and who's not. And I think this is again an example where we would agree that the government itself needs to make good decisions before we do anything that rash, basically.
How would you determine priority of free state services like healthcare and higher education and income or housing assistance?
Those are three good ones for sure. So housing, higher ed,
and income, healthcare.
Healthcare, okay. Healthcare is one that, I'll just give you a personal story. So you have, and that's, you know me, I like telling stories. So basically, you have the low income group of people that have the ability to have health insurance. The greatest thing about having those types of health insurance is the fact that you don't need to have, the pre-existing conditions. That's a big part. Now, my brother has had a heart attack. My brother has had major heart issues. My sister-in-law had a stroke here within the last year. They do not have health insurance. They make enough money so that they cannot have health insurance, basically, through this MNsure. And it's too expensive for them to actually have something. And because of their pre-existing system, it makes it very difficult for them. So healthcare would be something that would certainly be there. Housing is another one that is probably in my second part of that in that list. And we might, like I said earlier, we need to find ways that people can actually afford a home. Whether it's the down payment help, whether it's the rate, making sure the rates are there for them. And that's kind of where, what's the other one again?
That's
Higher education.
higher education.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, and higher education is, obviously we need to be able to make sure we have a workforce that has that education.
Thank you for that question. I know everyone loves to hear that all services are free and it's for everybody, but free doesn't always equal better. And the more times that we put money into free things for people and we're taxing the people that are paying taxes are paying more, and the people that aren't paying taxes are getting the free stuff. You can't keep redistributing wealth like that. And if we would get the government out of things, because I want small government, less regulations, so that you can afford things. The more money that we put out there for free, it just keeps rising the cost of everything. And that is not sustainable. And the more we do that, it will continually haunt Minnesota for years if we keep going down this path.
Keeping with you, Marge. What concrete steps will you take to push back on further corporatization of our healthcare system that strips workers of their rights and erodes patient care? That's how the question reads. Absolutely. What concrete steps will you take to push back on further corporatization of our healthcare system? We'll just stop it right there.
Well, again, when we're over-regulating things and offering more and more free things like insurance, that's driving it up because we have an abundance of people right now that are overwhelming our healthcare system because they go in for everything or they're not paying anything. And so everyone that can pay is paying more for those that don't. So we have to look at changing that. It's listening, learning, and advocating again about what we can do. But again, smaller government and less regulations, but yet keeping things in a way that is good and regulating, but not over-regulating.
You say that word again, corporatization?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not going to ask you to spell it.
Really? So if we look at corporatization, to me, that means like mergers. That means, Fairview, that means Sanford, that means Mayo. If they all merge together, we got big problems, everybody. It doesn't matter about regulations. It matters about what are you going to have for your, in St. James, we have Mayo, and it's very difficult for us that has this teaching insurance through the PEEB to even use Mayo. Luckily, Medelia Health has come to our town, and they're a private, old-school hospital that you can literally go and have your appointment on the same day. You can't get that at Mayo. You can't get that in New Alma. And I think it's important to make sure that we continue to have those local hospitals so that we can have the care that we need.
All right, next one. Has the Minnesota budget grown faster than the population? And then part two, are people leaving Minnesota? And then I'm going to add, and if so, can we get them back?
So Marge has brought up the surplus. As a mayor, I think we still have a surplus coming in Minnesota. So it's not like all of this money has completely disappeared. So I think we got to make sure we know that first. Certainly the budget's going to grow if you keep spending, right? I mean, if you continue to have these programs that, I would agree that it's too much. Sometimes you got to make sure that you have the money for what we really need. And that's the bridges, the roads, etc. People do leave Minnesota. People come back to Minnesota, I think is what I've seen. I think we're in the top 5 and top 10 of people where you want to live. I think that's an important piece that people don't ever talk about. Top 5 business in Minnesota is also a big piece. So I know there's people that certainly have issues with certain parts of Minnesota, but for the most part, it sure seems like people are staying here, living here, and having business here.
Thank you for that question. Last year, when I was on the legislative floor, I spoke about how our state was the top 3 for people leaving the state. Our government has grown by 40%. We cannot sustain that. It's not good for Minnesota. It's not good for businesses. It's not good for communities. If we want these things to grow, we have to cut government. We have to lower regulations, our taxes and fees. I would love to see Minnesota thriving and prosperous again. I think everybody does. Minnesota will be, when the family paid medical leave starts in 2026, we will be the top employer in the state. The government should not be your #1 employer. We need people like 3M to stay, not leave. And the more regulations that we pass and the more burdens that we put on our businesses and our communities, the more people will be leaving.
Do you support any restrictions on our Second Amendment rights? Well, that's obviously a federal deal, but I guess we can talk about it here in Minnesota as well.
Correct. I am completely for everything that the Second Amendment stands for. It is our right to protect ourselves. It is not about hunting. It is not about anything but protecting yourself against a tyrannical government. And it is not to be infringed.
I look at the Second Amendment as being able to own a gun, being able to have that. I'm not too worried about the tyrannical government that's going to be there, but I think everybody needs to make sure that we're able to do that. That's the Constitution. That's a Second Amendment right. There was a time when I was, kind of just doing work, government work, and I'd have the House session stuff on, and it alarmed me where we're kind of going. There was one thing that, and I don't know if it really passed or not, but there was a time where you have your gun case locked with a window. That's illegal. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, that's what I have. So sometimes, when we talk about gun violence and things like that, we got to sit back and make sure that we have common sense gun laws, but we got to make sure that everybody that should own a gun have that ability to do that as well.
I haven't heard discussion about this. Are they talking about a year-round legislative session? Is that a thing? Okay, well, then, judging by your facial expression, maybe I don't need to ask the question. How do you feel about a year-round session, and then how do you feel about term limits as well?
Okay, I'll start with the year-long. I do not think they need to be there all year. I think that January to May is certainly enough time. I saw a lot of wasteful time that was used the last session when I was actually paying attention and listening this whole time throughout that. I think they can get the things done a heck of a lot easier and faster. And at the same time, term limits, absolutely. Term limits should be there. You should have the ability to serve your time, but at the same time, I don't think you need to be serving it 20, 30, 40 years as well. So I think you should be able to have those, just like the president, they have term limits. I think hopefully at some point, I talked about a government class, that would be nice to have congressional limits as well, because you look at the longtime congressional leaders, a lot of times you need change there as well. So no different in the state government.
Thank you for that question. Our legislature is a citizen-led legislature. That means that we also have our own jobs that we do. And I think it's important to be out and about in the community as well and speaking to our constituents and learning what their concerns are. So I would not support a full-time legislature, and that bill did not go anywhere this session. But if things don't change and we don't get some common sense back, you might be seeing that again. So it's important to get out and vote and pay attention to what's going on in your government. So I do thank you all for doing that and spread the word.
All right, this question hasn't come up yet, but I'm going to bring it forward just because of a subject that dominated this end of the room earlier tonight, and that's roads. What can we do in St. Paul to make sure that counties and cities get better roads? Simplest way I can ask it. Start with.
Well, thank you for that question. I mean, our roads, we have 290,000 miles of roads here in Minnesota, so obviously that's a pretty big thing, and we're on the roads a lot here. They passed a lot of regressive tax in the last biennium, and that is something that we need to refocus our funding on our roads and bridges over clean energy. Everybody wants clean energy, but it shouldn't be mandated. So that is adding a lot of costs to our funding that we don't need. Road safety should be a priority, and they funded a train from Duluth. They want to do that, a train to Duluth from the cities, and it's $200 million, and it's not something that gets used, and it would be subsidized an incredible amount. You could almost pay for a car for what the subsidy is on those things. So we just kind of need to redirect, refocus, and get some common sense back into our transportation funding.
I brought it up earlier about local government aid, and that's where it would begin. Okay, so when you get into the local government aid, you're going to be talking about the local roads, you're going to be talking about water treatment plants, you're going to be talking about wastewater plants, and understand also that goes along with these mandates of chloride and things like that, is that at some point we're going to have these huge projects that you just simply can't pay for. And that's where, again, whatever money is being spent, you got to make sure you understand where that money is going. You're going to be accountable for where that money is from, that surplus. So if we're worried about, all these other things that are out there, that's one thing, but you've got to make sure that we have the roads, that we have the water, that we should be safe to drink, and make sure at some point cities are going to have wastewater issues that they're going to have to be able to understand that they're going to have to rebuild some things, and that's going to cost a lot of money. So we need to make sure we're proactive in how things are going, because roads, bridges, water treatment plants, etc., they're all going to be costing a lot of money.
All right. I'm going to plead ignorance on this question. I'll ask it and see where it goes. Do you feel the North Star program truly compares to the Build Dakota program? Is that something either you can answer?
Is that through like education or?
Is that the free college?
I don't. Is the person that wrote the question here? Okay. Well. All right. Here we go. This is a much more general question. How would you describe a successful session in the legislature? What would make it successful in your eyes?
Years ago, as a government teacher, I used to have congressional people come into my classroom. One was Bob Gunther way back in the day when he was a representative out of Fairmont, and also State Senator Julie Rosen, who was out of Fairmont Vernon Center. And Julie Rosen, I had known for at least 20 years back when I was on the school board in Fairmont in the early 2000s. And Julie was in my class during COVID. It was during a Zoom time that it was after 2021. And there was a lot of things going on in Washington and Congress. And the question that I had for her was, is St. Paul as bad as Washington in the division? Back then, 2021, she said, absolutely not. They work together. We work together. In fact, she had an example that she talked about that was a perfect example of that they do. What I saw last spring was way different. We need to make sure that these sessions are together and make sure that people work together as Democrats and Republicans, because the bottom line is we are all together.
Thank you for that question. I think that a great session would be cutting some over-regulations and taxes in our government, working together to do things as quickly and efficiently as possible, because an efficient government would help everybody in this state. And like I said, when we're cutting taxes and our regulations, you all have more of your own money to spend where you see fit. So that would be my goal.
All right, we've gone about 35 minutes or so, maybe even 40, so I think we're going to have our closing statements at this time. I would encourage you, if you want to talk to Mr. Wilson or Ms. Fogelman, to approach them. They're running for office, they're here for you, so if you can't catch them tonight before they go, reach out to them. Their contact information is on the Minnesota State Secretariat website, so they can't hide. But they're here to serve you. They're wanting to serve you, so feel free to reach out to them with your questions if it didn't get asked tonight for whatever reason. That said, I think John gave his opening statement first, so Marge will have you do your closing statement first.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. I decided to run for office because I wanted to do stuff for the greater good of all of Minnesota. Not just little separate boxes for each people, but for all of Minnesota. My strong Christian values lead me, and being a conservative is what our state needs right now. Having Democrats in full control has been disastrous for our state. I just read an article today that household remedial income is up in the U.S. around 4%, but funny enough, it is down 4% in Minnesota, while 3 of our 4 neighbors are also up in their remedial income. It's time for a change. We need to do something different. We need to restore some balance back in Minnesota. Know that I will be working to cut taxes, shrink government, and put more money in your pocket, and letting you decide to do what you want with your money. I believe that the government is supposed to work for you and not dictate your life. I want a government that is led by honor and trust, that listens to its citizens. With your help, together we can make a change for a more prosperous Minnesota. Please get out and vote and help make that change. And thank you for your attendance tonight. I am asking for your vote in November, and if you have any questions for me after, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you so much.
So I also want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I think this has been, how democracy is supposed to work. We're supposed to be able to have your candidates have this choice to, you have the opportunity to kind of get to know us a little bit better. One of the things that, I would love to be able to kind of go after a couple of the comments, but, Representative Fogelman has issues with working with the other party. And I think that's one of the things that I can do a lot better. One of the stories I have is my daughter has a severe nut allergy. My daughter has missed, we didn't find out until 6 years ago that she does not have a corpus callosum. And one time that she was listening to music, I started to listen to what she said. And it alarmed me because I know she was getting picked on in school. So have you felt like nobody was there? Have you ever felt forgotten in the middle of nowhere? Like you would fall and no one would hear. Even when dark comes crashing through, when you need a friend to carry you, and when you're broken on the ground, lift your head up and look around. That person is going to be me up in St. Paul. I will be there no matter what. I will be there for you. I will be there to make sure that you have the questions answered up in St. Paul. I will meet you down in your house. I will meet you in your town. I will meet you through Zoom. I will meet you anywhere at all, and make sure that I am there for you, the resident of 21B. I appreciate your vote on November 5th. Thank you very much tonight.
You've just done so. Let's give a round of applause for our Minnesota House 21B candidates, John Wilson and Marge Fogelman. And of course, a round of applause to our county commissioner candidates, Robert Jr., Dustin Allers, Gene Johnson, and Bob Paplow. All right, and thank you for coming out tonight. This has, I think, been a pretty good forum, covered a lot of ground. And don't forget to vote. You can vote it, as I said, on starting Friday already, and up until Election Day. So thank you again very much for coming, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.